If someone had told Elvis Presley that the happiest smile he would ever see would belong to a woman who was already saying goodbye to life, he never would have stepped onto that ice. Years later, thousands of people would remember the photographs. They would remember the applause. They would remember the famous singer laughing as he danced with a beautiful stranger beneath glowing winter lights. But not a single person in that crowded skating rink knew the truth. Not the children chasing each other across the ice. Not the couples holding hands. Not the musicians playing soft melodies through the old speakers. Not even Elvis himself. Because hidden inside the pocket of the young woman's white winter coat was a small, folded letter. A letter she had written the night before. It was not a love letter. It was a farewell. Before the sun set, that letter would become the reason Elvis Presley could never listen to the same song the same way again. Some people stay in your life for decades. Others stay for only a few hours. Yet somehow, the ones who leave first are often the ones who never truly leave your heart. This is the story of the dance that lasted only a few minutes, and the memory that lasted forever. Winter had wrapped the city in perfect silence. Fresh snow covered every rooftop like soft white velvet. Golden streetlights shimmered against the frozen sidewalks, while warm light poured from cafes where families escaped the bitter cold with cups of coffee and laughter. Horse-drawn carriages rolled slowly through the streets, their bells blending with distant Christmas music drifting through the evening air. Everything about the city felt peaceful. Everything except Elvis. To the world, he was the biggest star alive, a voice that could fill stadiums, a face recognized across continents, a man who seemed to have everything. But fame had become a room with no windows. Everywhere he went, people wanted a photograph, a signature, a performance, another smile, another version of Elvis Presley. Very few people ever asked how Elvis was feeling. Even fewer cared about the answer. For weeks, exhaustion had settled deep inside him. The endless concerts, interviews, flashing cameras, and crowded hotel rooms had left him longing for something he had almost forgotten existed. A normal afternoon. No spotlight, no screaming audience, just life. That morning, one of his closest friends smiled and tossed him a pair of old ice skates. "You've been hiding behind stages long enough," he laughed. "Come skate with us." Elvis chuckled. "I haven't skated in years." Exactly. Against his own expectations, he agreed. Less than 1 hour later, a black Cadillac rolled quietly through streets dusted with snow before stopping outside one of the oldest public skating rinks in the city. The building looked untouched by time. Its weathered wooden walls carried decades of winter memories. Children ran through the entrance carrying skates over their shoulders. Parents laughed while brushing snow from heavy coats. Inside, warm yellow lights reflected across a sheet of perfectly polished ice that shimmered like crystal beneath the ceiling. The moment Elvis stepped inside, something changed. For almost 1 full minute, nobody recognized him. Hidden beneath a dark wool coat, black gloves, a charcoal scarf, and a simple knit cap pulled low over his forehead, he looked almost ordinary. Almost. Then a little boy stopped walking. His eyes grew wide. He tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom?" His voice trembled with excitement. "I think that's Elvis Presley." Within seconds, another person turned, then another. Whispers spread through the rink like wind across fresh snow. "It can't be. Is it really him?" Oh my God, it is! The quiet afternoon exploded into excitement. People hurried toward him carrying notebooks, cameras, gloves, even scraps of paper. Children smiled so hard their cheeks turned bright red from the cold. Older couples thanked him for songs that had carried them through weddings, military deployments, heartbreak, and hope. Elvis never rushed anyone. He signed every autograph, posed for every photograph, knelt to speak with children at eye level, laughed with grandparents, listened to stories he had probably heard 100 times before, yet somehow always made each person feel like they were telling it for the first time. That was simply who he was. Nearly 40 minutes passed before the crowd slowly drifted away. Finally, silence returned. Elvis stepped onto the ice. The familiar scrape of steel against frozen water echoed beneath him. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, then pushed forward. The cold air filled his lungs. His body relaxed. For the first time in weeks, there was no audience, only movement, only winter, only peace. He skated without thinking. Wide, graceful circles, gentle turns, slow, effortless glides. Each pass across the rink seemed to peel away another layer of exhaustion he had carried for months. Then, he noticed her. She stood alone near the far wooden railing. She wasn't taking photographs. She wasn't whispering to friends. She wasn't staring at him with excitement. She wasn't even pretending not to look. She simply watched the skaters with quiet eyes that somehow carried both incredible kindness and impossible sadness. She wore a long ivory winter coat that reached below her knees. A pale blue scarf rested softly around her neck. Snowflakes melted slowly against strands of chestnut-colored hair escaping beneath a white knitted hat. Her hands remained folded together inside light gray gloves. Everything about her seemed calm, almost peaceful. Yet something inside her eyes felt strangely heavy, like someone smiling while carrying a storm no one else could see. Elvis couldn't explain why, but he found himself looking toward her again and again. Finally, their eyes met. She smiled. Not because she was meeting a celebrity, not because she wanted anything, simply because she was happy another human being had smiled first. For one strange heartbeat, the noise inside the rink disappeared. Elvis smiled back. He continued skating. So did she. Without speaking, without planning it, their paths slowly began crossing more often. Sometimes they passed within a few feet, sometimes farther apart. Neither said a word. Yet somehow, every time they crossed paths, both of them smiled, as though they already knew each other. Minutes later, a small child stumbled across the ice directly in front of Elvis. Instinctively, he reached forward to keep the little girl from falling. The sudden movement changed his direction. At the exact same instant, the young woman turned gracefully around another skater. Her blade caught the smallest crack in the ice. Everything happened in less than a heartbeat. She slipped. A quiet gasp escaped her lips. The world seemed to slow. Her balance disappeared. Her body tilted backward. Before she could hit the ice, two strong hands caught her. One arm wrapped gently around her waist. The other held her hand firmly. Silence. Even the music seemed to disappear. She opened her eyes. Elvis was only inches away. Their breaths formed tiny clouds between them in the freezing air. Neither moved. Neither spoke. For what felt like forever, They simply looked into each other's eyes. Then she whispered, almost apologetically, "I guess Winter wanted to introduce us." Elvis laughed softly. "I think Winter has excellent timing." A wave of relieved laughter spread across the rink. People who had witnessed the near fall burst into applause. Someone shouted from across the ice, "Come on, Elvis!" Another voice followed, "She owes you a dance!" Within seconds, the entire rink joined in. "Dance! Dance! Dance!" The sound echoed through the old wooden building.
The young woman lowered her eyes, clearly embarrassed.
"I'm sorry," she whispered. "They don't know when to stop."
Elvis looked around at the smiling crowd, then back at her. He slowly removed one glove, extended his hand, and with the gentlest smile she had ever seen, he said only 5 words. "Then let's make them smile." For a moment, she didn't move. Her eyes quietly filled with tears she refused to let fall. Because Elvis had no way of knowing that she had spent months dreaming about hearing those words, or that every single heartbeat since her diagnosis had led to this exact moment. Very slowly, she placed her trembling hand into his. Her name, though Elvis did not know it yet, was Claire Bennett. And before the music ended, she would ask him a single question, but would haunt him for the rest of his life. The orchestra's gentle melody drifted across the frozen rink, as though winter itself had begun to sing. For several long seconds, neither Elvis nor Claire moved. The applause around them slowly faded into the background until it became nothing more than a distant echo. The crowd was still watching, smiling, whispering, expecting a light-hearted performance from America's biggest star. They had no idea they were about to witness something far more beautiful than entertainment. They were about to witness 2 strangers changing each other's lives. Elvis tightened his grip just enough to let Claire know she was safe. "Ready?" he asked with a warm smile. Claire looked down at their joined hands. "I've been ready for a very long time." Something about her answer caught him off guard. It sounded too honest, too personal, almost as if she hadn't been talking about skating at all. Before he could ask what she meant, the music carried them forward. Their skates glided across the smooth ice with surprising harmony. Neither of them was trying to impress the other. There were no dramatic tricks, no impossible spins, only graceful circles beneath glowing lights, while soft snow continued falling outside the old wooden windows. The spectators watched quietly. Children stopped chasing each other. Couples leaned against the railing. Even the rink employees paused their work. The atmosphere felt strangely sacred. It was as if everyone instinctively understood they should not interrupt whatever was unfolding before them. "You skate beautifully," Elvis said. Claire smiled without looking at him. "My father taught me when I was little." "He must have been very proud." "He was." A brief silence followed. "He passed away several years ago." "I'm sorry." "So am I." Her voice remained calm, yet Elvis could hear the loneliness hidden beneath every word. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She had already learned how to carry grief by herself. They continued skating. Each slow turn seemed to make conversation easier. Unlike everyone else he met, Claire never mentioned records, concerts, awards, or fame. She asked about ordinary things. "What did you want to be before music?" Elvis laughed. "I wanted to drive trucks." She looked genuinely surprised. "Really?"
My father still says I'd probably be happier. Claire laughed, and the sound was so sincere that Elvis found himself laughing with her. For the first time in weeks, nothing felt forced. No cameras, no expectations. Only two people discovering how easy conversation could be when nobody wanted anything. You know, Claire said after another quiet moment, people look at you as if you're larger than life. I've noticed. But when I look at you, she hesitated, I just see someone who's tired. The words landed softly, yet they struck deeper than any headline ever had. Elvis stared at her. Nobody had ever described him that way. Not managers, not reporters,
Not fans, not even close friends. Because everyone saw the legend. Claire saw the man. He looked away toward the falling snow beyond the windows. Sometimes, he admitted quietly, I forget who I am when the applause ends. Claire nodded. I think everyone wears a mask. What about you? My mask smiles more than I do. For a moment, neither spoke. The music shifted into an even slower melody. Without thinking, Elvis gently guided Claire into another graceful turn. The applause returned. Someone near the railing shouted, You two look like you've been skating together for years. Claire smiled politely toward the crowd. If only they knew. Elvis looked at her. Knew what? She quickly shook her head. Nothing. But there was something. He could feel it. Every few minutes her smile faded for just a heartbeat, before returning again. Every now and then she quietly caught her breath, almost as though the cold air hurt her lungs. Once, while Elvis was looking away, she pressed her hand gently against the inside pocket of her coat, making sure something was still there. The folded letter. She had read it countless times before leaving home. She had almost decided not to bring it. Yet somehow, she knew she would need it before the day was over. They completed another slow circle around the rink. Can I ask you something? Claire said. Anything. If today were the final day of your life, she paused, what would you regret the most? The question arrived so unexpectedly that Elvis almost lost his rhythm. He looked at her carefully. Most people asked him about music, success, money, Hollywood. Nobody had ever asked him this. He thought for several long moments before answering. I think, he smiled sadly, I'd regret all the people I was too busy to truly know. Claire lowered her eyes. And love? Elvis's expression softened. I've spent my whole life surrounded by people. He looked around at the cheering crowd. But sometimes I've never felt more alone. Claire's eyes shimmered beneath the rink lights. I understand. You do? She nodded. Loneliness isn't measured by how many people stand beside you. She looked directly into his eyes. It's measured by how many truly see you. Elvis couldn't speak. Because somehow, a woman he had known for less than an hour had just described a feeling he had carried for years. The song slowly came to an end. The applause thundered through the rink once again. People whistled. Children cheered. Several couples even began clapping in rhythm. Elvis bowed playfully, making everyone laugh. Claire giggled. It was the happiest she had looked all afternoon. How about some hot chocolate? Elvis asked. I know a little cafe across the street. For the first time, her smile disappeared. She looked toward the snowy windows, then toward the letter hidden inside her coat. Finally, back at Elvis. "I wish I could." The words barely escaped her lips. "But some beautiful moments," she swallowed hard, "should never be stretched beyond the moment they belong to." Elvis frowned gently. "What do you mean?" Claire stepped one pace backward. Snowflakes drifted through the entrance as someone opened the rink door. The cold winter breeze lifted a few loose strands of her hair. She smiled once more. A smile filled with gratitude. A smile hiding unbearable sorrow. "You gave me something today," she whispered, "that I thought life had already taken away." Before Elvis could answer, she reached into her pocket for just a brief second. Her fingers rested on the folded letter. Not yet. She wasn't ready. Not while she could still hear the music. Not while he was still smiling. Very gently she released his hand. "I have to go." "Will I see you again?" Claire looked at him for what felt like forever.
Her eyes silently apologized for an answer she could never say aloud. Then she whispered only 4 words. "I truly hope so." She turned, walked through the crowd, and disappeared into the falling snow beyond the old wooden doors. Elvis remained standing alone on the ice, watching the entrance long after she was gone. He didn't know why, but for the first time in his life, meeting someone for less than 1 hour already felt like losing them. He had no way of knowing that exactly 1 week later, a plain white envelope would arrive in his hands, and everything Claire had hidden behind that beautiful smile would finally be revealed. For 7 days, Elvis could not explain why he kept thinking about a woman whose last name he did not even know. Life returned to its familiar rhythm. Recording sessions, business meetings, television interviews, photographers waiting outside every building, crowds calling his name everywhere he went. He smiled for the cameras. He thanked his fans. He sang with the same passion the world had always admired. But somewhere behind every performance, his thoughts wandered back to a quiet skating rink, to soft orchestral music, to snow falling beyond old wooden windows, and to a young woman with kind eyes who had somehow looked past the legend and spoken directly to the lonely man hiding behind it. He replayed every conversation in his mind, every smile, every laugh, every pause, especially her question. If today were the final day of your life, what would you regret the most? At the time, it had sounded like philosophy. Now, it felt like something else, like a goodbye he had been too blind to recognize. On the 7th morning, Elvis arrived home after another exhausting recording session. His housekeeper met him at the front door. "Mr. Presley," she said softly, "a letter arrived for you." She handed him a plain white envelope. No return address, no stamp from a fan club. Only his name, written carefully by hand. Elvis Presley. The handwriting felt strangely familiar. His heartbeat slowed. Without understanding why, he already knew. He walked into the living room without removing his coat. The fire crackled quietly in the fireplace. Outside, snow drifted across the windows. Everything was silent except for the sound of the envelope opening beneath trembling fingers. Inside, there was a photograph. The moment he saw it, his breath caught. It was the dance. Someone had captured the exact instant he caught Claire before she fell. She was looking at him. He was smiling at her. Neither of them was looking toward the camera. It was as if the photograph had frozen the exact second two strangers stopped being strangers. Elvis turned the photograph over. There, written in delicate blue ink, were the words that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Dear Elvis, if you are reading this, it means I could not find the courage to tell you the truth while we were together. My name is Claire Bennett. 6 months ago, doctors told me that the illness inside my body could no longer be stopped. They told me to prepare for the little time I had left. People always ask what they would do if they knew their life was ending. I made a list. It wasn't very long. I wanted to see the first snowfall one more time. I wanted to hear my father's favorite song. I wanted to forgive everyone I had been angry with. And at the very top of my list, I wanted one dance with the man whose music carried me through the hardest nights of my life. Not because you were famous, because your songs reminded me that hope can survive even after heartbreak. I waited for months, hoping our paths might cross. When you held my hand on the ice, my greatest dream came true. When you smiled at me, I forgot I was dying. For a few beautiful minutes, I was simply alive. Please don't be sad for me. I did not lose my life. I lived my happiest day. Thank you for my last dance. Claire. By the time Elvis reached the final line, the page had become blurred, not because of the firelight, because tears had fallen onto the paper. He lowered the letter into his lap. His hands shook uncontrollably. He had stood before audiences of tens of thousands. He had performed beneath blinding lights without fear. He had faced critics, pressure, exhaustion, and fame. Yet nothing had ever broken him the way a single, handwritten letter did. For a long time, he simply sat there. The room remained completely still. Then, something slipped from inside the envelope, a small admission ticket. The skating rink. On the back, Claire had written one final sentence. Some people spend a lifetime searching for one perfect memory. You gave me mine. Elvis closed his eyes. He could hear the orchestra again. He could almost feel her hand resting gently in his. Weeks passed. Winter slowly faded into spring. Spring gave way to summer. Then autumn returned. Finally, the first snow of another winter covered the city. Without telling anyone where he was going, Elvis drove alone. His Cadillac stopped in front of the same old skating rink. Nothing had changed. Children still laughed. Families still gathered. Music still echoed beneath the wooden roof. Only one person was missing. Elvis rented a pair of skates. The employee recognized him immediately. It has been a long time since you visited. Elvis smiled gently. I promised myself I'd come back. He stepped onto the ice. The cold welcomed him once more. He skated slowly toward the center, toward the exact place where he had caught Claire. Toward the place where two lives had quietly touched for only a few precious minutes. The orchestra began playing. Not by coincidence. It was the very same melody from that unforgettable afternoon. Elvis stopped moving. He closed his eyes, and in the silence, he smiled. Not because the pain was gone, but because love had taught him that grief is simply another way the heart remembers. The families watching from the sidelines noticed something unusual. Every winter after that, Elvis returned, always alone, always carrying the same photograph inside his coat. He never explained why. He would skate one slow circle around the rink, stop in the middle, look toward the empty space beside him, smile, then quietly whisper, "Thank you for the dance, Claire." No one around him understood those words. To everyone else, he was speaking to the cold winter air. But Elvis knew better.
Because love is not measured by how long two people are together. Sometimes, it is measured by how deeply one brief moment changes an entire lifetime. Years later, after Elvis himself was gone, the old skating rink was renovated. Workers replacing the wooden benches discovered something hidden beneath one of the seats. A small metal box. Inside it were only 3 things. The photograph of Elvis and Claire dancing, Claire's letter, and a folded piece of paper written in Elvis's own handwriting. It contained just one sentence. "The world gave me applause. Claire gave me a memory worth more than every standing ovation I ever received." The photograph was eventually placed inside a small glass frame near the entrance of the rink. Visitors often stopped to admire it. Most believed it was simply a beautiful picture of Elvis dancing with a fan. Very few ever asked who she was. And perhaps that was exactly how Claire would have wanted it. Not remembered as the girl who was dying, but as the girl who smiled so brightly that, for one unforgettable afternoon, she made the king of rock and roll forget the weight of the world. Because in the end, the greatest love stories are not always measured by years. Sometimes, they are measured by a single song, a single winter afternoon, and one last dance that never truly ends.